We go. Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is the IGA task force meeting, so we will commence the meeting. And we will start with roll call, and Julie's going to help with that today.
I am, and so I'm here, Julie Jacobs, Jen Winger, did I say that right?
Yes.
Yay! Cindy Fisher, Sunny Smith. Do I need to say who everyone is? I think we all know at this point. I mean, these are task force members, Dave Hamrick, Board of Trustee Liaison. Barney is not here yet. We have our co-chair, Martin Susloff. Did I pronounce that right?
Like Dr. Seuss.
Susloff, so I did say it right. Excellent. Charles Stevenson. I don't know who you are.
I'm Cassidy. I'm the planner one.
She just started last week.
Cassidy, what's your last name?
Davenport.
Davenport. And we know our Andrew Bowen, Chair, Fearless Leader, Doug Matthews,
Here.
Wendy Miller. Here. And then Victoria just. Hi. So I think that's everybody.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we have a slightly simplified agenda versus last week, and I thought it would be best to start with some kind of opening comments and learnings. Talk a little bit about to clarify the definition of the IGA task force, or the IGA itself, which was a big topic last week. And then and here comes Barney right now.
Right, I can unhighlight everybody.
And then if anybody has a few quick comments just about last week's before we dive in to the next section, which will really be a discussion of maps. And I'll explain why we want to do that.
Should we approve the agenda first?
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. That's why this is a team. So you've all seen the agenda. I think I talked just a moment about it. Does anybody have any questions about the agenda, suggestions, additions, deletions, comments?
The only thing that popped into my head is around this discussion and the outline you sent on the Word document was very helpful. We have to consider and continue to think about use and highest and best use and how they apply to particular areas and particular parts of town, I guess. That's all.
Yeah, great suggestion. I think when we get into reviewing the maps and then tonight's tour will help us sort of visualize what the properties are. And then I think that'll be part of our decision-making and recommendation process. Thank you.
I move to approve the agenda. Second.
Right, we are good to go then on the agenda. So some opening comments.
Wait, one more, sorry, approved minutes from the last meeting.
Oh, shit.
I'm over here just looking at it, that's why.
Are there any additions, comments, suggestions, or edits on the minutes from the last meeting? Do I have a movement to?
Movement to approve.
Motion to approve. The second, do we have a second?
I'll be your parliamentarian.
Yeah, please do.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah,
So
that'd be great.
everyone, we didn't actually vote on the agenda, everyone just said yes, so yes on the minutes as well.
Okay. I like that you two keep us on task. I'll try to keep us on topic. and
We'll
keep us on
try.
I've given permission to Victoria to throw things at me if I
Oh, fun.
send out the wrong
Did you bring
document.
fun projectiles? Great.
I think the best way to start some comments is to fill you all in a little bit about me and I think what we learned last week. I guess the best way to understand me, if you went back to all my elementary school reports, it said two things. It says plays well with others, and while slow, he can be taught. So I've sort of embraced those two things my whole life. So when I left last week's meeting, as some of you might have, my head was sort of spinning about, how do we direct this group of neighbors that don't know each other and through a fairly complicated field full of minefields. And I really went back and watched the video again, and there was so much good stuff when you think about it, that came out of last week's, that it allowed me to kind of rethink how we want to approach this. So as an example, I think Sonny in particular, the very first thing he said at the beginning was one word. Everybody remember what that was?
Be smart.
Smart, right? And so I think that's really what we need to do with this project is boil it down to more simple, clear objective of what fits in the scope of it and just be smarter about it. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is have a smarter look at the IGA document. Okay, Julie had some really good points to sort of summarize what she was saying. It was essentially, how do we as a collective group, and I think Charles chimed in on this as well, how do we with our diverse backgrounds and not being experts in planners or property use, how do we make determinations about particular properties? And I think the answer to that is that's really not our goal. Our goal isn't to make specific determinations about properties, but it's really to look at the IGA document, understand what the changes in that document are, and review all the information we can gather, which there's a ton of information, documentation. There's a lot of smart people associated with this. We can talk to anybody and everybody, and we've seen that there's a lot of people willing to give us information. So our mission is really to look at it, consider the information, and determine if the decisions made or if the recommendations or items in the IGA were correct, or if we think the Board of Trustees needs to look at it. So our job's not to say, this is what should happen on this property. It's more to say, we think this particular property needs to be looked at for this reason or that reason, right? Cindy brought up an issue during the last one, that it's really critical for us to understand the changes in the IGA document from 2012 to 2024. Of course, there's going to be changes. I think that was the other part of the debate. It would be natural that there would be changes, but we need to collectively understand what those changes are, why they've been made, what considerations were made, so that we can provide clear direction to the Board of Trustees. Charles opened the discussion and I think chimed in and later followed up with some clarity of the need to really understand what the IGA is all about, and more importantly, how do we talk about it with our neighbors? I think he left probably and was trying to talk to neighbors, and I sensed came back going, I don't have a clear elevator pitch on the IGA. And so we'll deal with that today. I did do that draft. There's nothing sacred in it, but it tries to boil it down to a one pager. And we'll talk about that today, and add that to our minutes, after this meeting. Martin's comments during last week's meeting were focused on the big picture. And so I think that kind of brings this all together. This is really about not one piece of property or one topic, but really let's focus on the whole thing, smarter, more logical. Jen, even though she wasn't here last week, had a comment that she was really concerned about, has somebody looked at all the various risk factors or elements that are associated with the various properties in the IGA, and how do we understand what consideration has been given to those? And again, I think part of what we're going to try to do over the next couple of days or couple of sessions is understand physically where those properties are and understand what's in the IGA related to those properties, so that we can then ask those questions about what was considered or what wasn't considered. As far as me, I think what I came away from last week's meeting was that I came in with the assumption that we were all sort of on equal levels of understanding of what the IGA is, what's been going on, what some of the comments are, and I've realized clearly that we're all at different levels. Some people have been way more involved in this since it sort of erupted, if that's the right word, some months ago. Others are just getting up to speed on it. And so I totally respect and understand that. And I think our path forward is going to be to make sure that we're all moving forward at the same time with the same information to try to come up with our conclusion. Again, for me, it's really about focusing on what the changes were between the documents and why. It's about collecting data and making sure that all of you are getting your answers about what data's out there, what do we need to understand, what was looked at when this IGA draft was developed. And the fourth thing is we touched on, but I don't think we really resolved how to work to get citizen input. And I'll kind of reiterate what I said last week, where I think that's really important for all of us collectively and individually. But ultimately, after we do our recommendations to the Board of Trustees, they're going to do their work to craft or recraft the IGA with or without our recommendations. And then it really will be up to them to cast a broad net to get broad citizen input. And so while we want to try to make sure we're touching people's, at least in our neighborhoods and some of the people outside of town, Apple Valley Road in specific, I don't think we need to feel like we need to have specific hearings for the task that we're trying to do. But that certainly is open for discussion. So those are my thoughts and comments from last week. I want to see if anybody else has any thoughts, recommendations, comments, criticisms related to last week's discussion.
I just wanted to say that I appreciate everybody's patience with me last week because I feel like I'm the one that's trying to catch up as much as possible. This is all new, really new information for me. And so I maybe have been pumping the brakes a little bit to try to gather as much as I could to understand exactly what it was. So, but my commitment is to, being as, calm and cool and collected in this process as possible. And if my, way of communicating my needs to catch up with y'all was out of, that commitment, I just wanted to be accountable to that. So,
Thank you very much.
but I appreciate your summary of it. And yeah, I just wanted to figure out how we can represent. It's definitely been challenging because I feel like I'm catching up, but also trying to understand where does this thing fit relative to the Lions comprehensive Thrive plan, and like, where do we fit into that whole process? While I've got neighbors who are frustrated about certain things that are definitely not in the scope of the IGA, they're more in the scope of like Lions Thrive. And so trying to figure out how to parse that information and then bring it into those opinions into this process has been a little challenging for sure. So this has been helpful.
Douglas, when she was talking about maps last week and larger maps, and I'm not sure if Victoria or somebody could provide one. In the future, is it possibility that there could be like an extremely large map that be like a clear overlay map that people could come in and look at any time during the time, and that overlay map that's kind of clear, say like if it was 2 or 3 times larger than that map, that people could come in and lift up and see that type of map, see what we're doing in progress.
Right.
And look at a clear overlay map.
Yeah.
And maybe it could be even computerized or digitized where people can see it even now, like online, whether or not they saw it here. And like,
Yes. And so one of the main topic we're going to get into today will be maps. I burned through 2 colored cartridges last night trying to print
right,
individual sets of maps. I've been able to get
you
access.
can always send information to me. I have a really nice, I'm an artist, so I have a
Awesome.
really nice professional
Yeah.
color printer. I got plenty of ink, so if you need to send shit to me.
Yeah, and so we'll spend quite a lot of time on this later today.
Okay.
It will be in our minutes, this document. It's a PDF, and I'll try to put it on the screen here in just a few minutes. But understanding the maps is a really important first step. It's not the only step, but it's a really important first step, not only for us, but for the public. So-
Right, well, the reason I asked you that, because I know how important it is. I know it, and I hope it's not too late to do something like that,
Not at all.
because it's nice stepping stone for us to have that map, because people want to see that, they want to see where our direction we're going. Like you said, citizen input and the timing, like on the smart side, to have that flippable, miner-able, ease with eyes and just for information, because people are going to like, hey, why is this? Why is that? And they're looking at it and they want to be able to, okay, how's that meet? How's that set? You know?
Yep.
And then like she said, as we get older, we got eyes. And our eyes, we want to be able to see stuff, and see how it looks, okay? So I thought I'd throw that in real quick.
That's
before we get
perfect.
going, okay?
So after we go through this today, let me know if we're getting closer to your goal. Yeah, you're,
And it's not the town's expectation that you all privately print materials. So if you have materials that you need printed for the task force, please feel free to send those along. We just need some time to get those printed for you.
Yeah.
So I don't want you having to burn your cartridges when we can do that.
It
This
don't-
is
it don't
this is a
mind.
town task force, so don't feel like you need to have that
This is
burden.
jumbo printer right
Yeah.
next door here.
it was late last night.
All
And I, on my other screen was a video of all of you doing some heavy lifting. So I thought it was better to
All right, well, thank you for
print
that.
some maps. Any other comments?
Let only other members.
Yeah. Any other thoughts,
I'll
comments?
just kind of piggyback on what Charlie said is, reading these paragraphs, it can be confusing, because the one in bold says specifically the IGA is intended to define what properties might be considered for future annexation and development, and generally what should be the nature of that development, generally being sort of the operative word there. And then it says the IGA does not define any specific development plans, but helps to guide priorities and areas of focus. So again, within the DOT and town staff, further, the IGA does not specifically address any development activity. So basically, the gray areas become very gray when you start talking about what our responsibilities are versus actual uses, things that are actually going on in the eastern quarter at this point that we need to get people up to speed on. And also, just in general, the fact that even though these are broad, big picture parameters, we still have to consider things that you just said involving Lions Thrive and things like that. And I just wanted to.
Can I tack on to that? Because it does say that it's general, but then when you look at the IGA draft, they talk about the Carpenter parcel, 25%
right.
this. So they may say that it's general, but then when you look at the town's own rhetoric, it's not really general.
It's confusing. though.
And I mean, it isn't consistent, which makes everything confusing.
I would just like to say that the comprehensive town for plan, Thrive, what is referred to now, was public input and desires and wants of the town citizens. It's kind of a compiled idea or document of what people want here in town. The IGA is kind of that, coupled with an agreement with Boulder to use this space or these properties compliant to both governments wanting to work together and have the same ideas and uses for these properties. So just because there's, it has to do with a joint comprehensive plan, basically. It's, it's shared development, it's shared. So that's where the IGA piece comes in. It's coupled with the comprehensive plan. It's not, it's not exclusive of, or they don't have to 100% match up just because one document says this and one says this, and oh my gosh, it's not, doesn't work, right? Like whoever owns the property still has to annex, it's up to the board to, do all the zoning, and so there's a lot more that goes into it than just saying, hey, this piece of property, this is what's gonna happen,
Yes,
don't.
but if those do not align, if there's a piece of property and it does not align with the plan, it is important to know which is, two things cannot be opposite and both be true. So it is then important to know which one do you stand on the rock and say it's this.
I might interject here again, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
This question came up at the last meeting as well. So I think and it's important and it bears repeating, I think, which is that adopted comprehensive plans typically they're not regulatory documents, they're advisory documents. An intergovernmental agreement is a mutually binding legal agreement. So when you're asking which one has sort of more strength, I guess, it's definitely going to be the intergovernmental agreement.
And to add on to that, thank you, Hannah, that was really good, because the draft of how we summarized it very much picks up on the wording you used last week, which I thought was brilliant. I think our task is not to relitigate the comprehensive plan. But if we see things as we go through this, either on specific properties or in the tone and tenor and wording of the actual document itself, that we feel are meaningfully out of sync with some aspect of the comprehensive plan, that should be captured as one of our recommendations to the Board of Trustees. Not for us necessarily to reconcile it, although we might try if we're able, if it's simple, but really to flag that this IGA is inconsistent with this part of the comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
Without relitigating the comprehensive plan amongst ourselves. Yeah. Does that seem fair to everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, does that seem right, Cindy?
And if I may, I think it's also important for this group, and I'm sure you have all read Lions Thrive, but to ensure that you're looking at every section, every goal, not just one goal, because, every development proposal, you can always find something that's non-congruent with something else. So it's important that this is a balance, right? And what we're trying to achieve is a balance. So just keep in mind that there are several strategies, several goals. Barney's more familiar with the Lions Thrive comprehensive plan than I am, and they all need to try to correlate with one another. And sometimes you do. You have to get creative, and you have to figure out how to make things work within that structure, within reason. I'm not saying you just make stuff up and say, "Hey, this works," but that's a balance you have to always try to find with comprehensive planning.
Any other comments, questions before we move on?
Just one question. Is
Yes, sir.
is it possible that if someone here is like really understands the comprehensive plan such that they live and breathe it, assuming that that's the lens that we want to use, going through the IGA with that lens and saying this is like lined up with it or not lined up with it, and just noting it? Because I feel like that would be a really valuable, I know that that's just a snapshot of public sentiment from a year ago, but like,
And when we get in, my thought process was, that's a very good question. Like, how do they align or not align?
yeah.
I think when we get in, once we know where the properties are, we have that sort of in our head. I think the next thing is to look at the actual documents and do that comparison. I have an initial assessment of that. I know other people have done a similar assessment, and we can bring that in as discussion pieces, I think, when necessary.
Yeah.
Again, without the risk we run is relitigating the
Right.
comprehensive plan.
Totally.
And that would get us so far off course. Again, our focus really needs to be on what is in the IGA that we think requires recommendations or changes or consideration by the Board of Trustees. And every time we get into the weeds, which I forgot my parking lot list today, sorry. Every time we get into the weeds, we need to go back to that. We're not redrafting anything, we're just making recommendations. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, totally.
And if it would be valuable, it might be worth, there are several members on the planning commission, Bonnie being one, that are very familiar with the comprehensive plan. So if it would be a request of this board to maybe, I don't think a full joint session would be necessary, but inviting a few of the PCDC members that worked on that closely, I think that would be.
David was the chair of it.
Yeah,
So you've got two
We've
here.
got some good resources.
Yeah, and just to add about the comp plan, so, yeah, I was, myself and the mayor pro tem at the time were, I would say, primary authors of the document. That said, really, it was, we hired a consulting group, did a lot of public input, compiled it all, so our job wasn't to inflect our viewpoints into it, was more, hey, is this what we heard? But all that said, I mean, this is, the comp plan gets done every 10 years. And it's not written in stone and up on top of a mountain somewhere. So it's a living document. So the intent was, let's reflect what the community input is at that point in time. Because it should be evergreen though. So as Doug said, if we find there's some things that are out of sync with that, then it's this group shouldn't be doing it, but we can go back and revisit the comp plan and change things. That really was the intent. The intent, chapter 4 of it, was to look and do at least an annual review of all the action items. So anyway, so I think the comp plan is what it is. It's a good framework and directional input, but it's not written in stone either. So I think it'll be interesting to use that as a reflection. Is this really map what we're thinking today versus what the comp plan said? And that said, I want to reflect on what Hannah said last week, which was, I thought was really the key, because she said, we're kind of trying to overthink a lot of this. And she said, let's just focus on what properties this group would consider for development. Some of those are already in there. Maybe there's others that should be considered. And then once you look at what properties, then what kind of development would you think about? Residential, commercial, whatever. So I think those are things the Board of Trustees would be interested in here.
Yes,
I
Sorry.
was like, are
Sorry.
you gonna call me? Also, I think we need to consider what properties are gonna be good for other things as well, like, utilities, fire mitigation, other things besides just development.
Residential other than residential.
Yeah. Fire mitigation is a big one, I think. And utilities are also something that we need to consider, so.
Yeah, one of the things I think, to your point, Wendy, when we do the tour tonight, it'll be interesting to hear from the town's perspective what properties they think are advantageous. And so I heard the prior planner was talking about, we need a different water tower because water pressure's poor. So some of those properties conserve that. Or for instance, many of the neighborhoods around the town only have one, ingress and egress in case of a fire.
Exactly.
What do you do? So anyway, so there
Yeah.
could be it'll be good to hear, what the highest and best use is of that property, but also what are some other benefits that could be, if the town's interested. Properties.
Just the last question that I'm trying to answer for myself is how, we were all kind of selected for different profiles that we have, like I'm a renter, I live in Confluence, I've got a family that wants to move here permanently, and I want to also represent the Confluence folks. How do I then think about the specific properties with that lens? That's what I'm trying to understand. It's like,
So that's,
how do I represent the renters?
Yeah.
And the
so that's a perfect segue.
Confluence folks?
So, what I wanted to do and thanks for teeing that up, is I tried to put in simple words a definition of what our role is as a task force, and we've all kind of talked on it already. I'll pass this around just because it's easier to read. We don't necessarily need to get into wordsmithing everything, but I want to just make sure we're all in agreement on the broad ideas of what the role of the task force is. So I'll just roll through this real quick and then open it up for comment. So the IGA task force mission is, number one, to learn what properties are being discussed within the 2024 draft IGA. To understand, number two, understand what changes from the prior IGA to the draft 24 IGA are in regards to the map, like where what properties are physically included or excluded, or what changes to those properties. And also to look at the document in terms of tone, direction, goals, et cetera, in order to gain an understanding of what data, processes, and considerations went into those decisions, right? So understand the changes and why those changes were made. That's the second thing that we need to do. Number 3 is determine as a group if we agree or disagree with the changes in those documents, and or do we feel that they were made with adequate consideration of the various inputs needed. And I think that to me, that kind of captures at least what I've heard from a number of you, directly from a few of you, and it's kind of what I've heard from neighbors and other townsfolk. Number 4, to Dave's point, to determine if there are other properties or areas of consideration that we feel should be added to the IGA discussion. And then our last and most important role probably will then be to draft, edit, debate, and agree on recommendations to the Board of Trustees on what areas of the IGA we feel need to be reviewed, revised, edited, in general or specific ways. Excuse the few typos in my trying to summarize this. Does that seem clear? And does anybody have any thoughts or edits, or not typing edits, but big bucket edits?
Yeah, the only thing that, again, Cindy touched on it is, with that draft, how specific to get with some of these suggestions.
Yeah.
The draft isn't clear. Those parameters that are attached to those parcels, are those just examples of ideas that they want to put in, or are those already in place?
Yeah, I trust them. So again, and Hannah, you can jump on anytime, but we have in our comp plan and in Boulder County's comp plan, we have language that states that affordable housing and attainable housing is important to our community. So when looking at annexing new properties, we do not have a local housing authority. We partner with Boulder County, but we do not have kind of those rules and regs set up within our own code system. So in putting those restrictions, and what you're seeing in the IGA is really inclusionary zoning. So you're making sure that some percentage, you're setting the expectation for a developer that might buy one of these properties or develop this property, that 50% may be market rate. And that's fine. But the other 50% or whatever that percentage is, it matters, but it doesn't for today. We're ensuring that we don't just get another neighborhood that's unaffordable for the general public of the community. So we're trying to align our comprehensive plan goal of having affordability and not putting the onus on the current market, but future annexations and future developers. So that's why those restrictions are in there, is to try to find balance in, okay, if we're gonna add this into the town, we need some negotiation in the future.
And item number 2 on there, that's why it specifically says we're gonna look at the maps and the document itself. So if you look at the old IGA, it doesn't have anywhere near the level of specificity that the new one does. If you look at any of the other Boulder IGAs that I've been able to find in the public record, and I don't know if I've seen them all, I couldn't find anybody that had anywhere near the specificity that we do. I'm not saying that's right or it's wrong. I kind of feel like, to Andrew's points, by being specific, that sets a property owner or developer up to know our expectations before they go there. But during our review as a task force, we can make that determination if we think the board should keep specificity or if they should reduce it. That's within our purview of making that recommendation.
Are Boulder County lines outside of where our lines are for towns?
Well, that's actually kind of what we're doing, is drawing the line of,
Our
Yeah,
sample.
that's what I wanted to ask.
we're increasing our town line
Okay.
of influence into Boulder County.
Okay,
If I
that's what I
understand the
wanted to
idea
double
right.
check.
We're defining the town of Lyons sandbox,
Okay,
the areas that we can play and grow and develop. And that not only defines where we won't go, but it also defines where Boulder County won't, they won't play in our sandbox if we don't play in theirs.
Right.
Hannah, maybe you don't, if that's a bad.
Well, yeah, I'm
description,
asking, I'm asking that because you know how Boulder County,
Here you go. There's a map of
Is
the
that- you
county's
got it
the
right there?
big map. County's the black line on the outside. Well, it's even bigger than
Hold
that.
on, I'm trying to move. Sorry, Hannah, I
The
gotta
purple
move you
line is
over.
what we're trying to define, which goes into Boulder County more than it gets to.
Yeah, so let me zoom out so we can see the legend. So now
and
we've
right
got
now-
too
right,
small.
but outside of that line, Boulder County, that doesn't necessarily say open space. That also
No.
could say private land
It's
too,
just
right?
Yeah,
Boulder
everything,
County.
everything.
That's correct.
Andrew, I can't see what you're projecting on the screen. Am I supposed to be able to?
It's just the IGA map.
We're seeing your family picture. On the Zoom, we're seeing the picture on the screen, we're seeing the map.
Let's see, hold
But
on,
it's a
let me,
beautiful family.
In that southeast corner, IG, Snyder area, site specific.
So-
Okay, keep going.
So we'll,
I
when we
know
get
we
into the
to it.
maps,
I know
we'll,
get- I know
yeah,
we
we'll get to that, but
Okay.
that's what the IGA
Doug?
is. Yes,
So I think from watching the pitchforks meetings, because I mean, I didn't know anything about the northern, area, so that's from an outsider, that's how it looked like, one of those Frankenstein movies, right? So I think what I saw, as I stood there waiting my turn for a day and a half, was what people seem to be mostly upset with was it was taking their community that was R1 on big lots and subdividing a big area and saying, oh, well, if we had one house on every acre, but we'll just put it in this 5 acres and have high density or medium density. I think from an outsider's point of view, that's why people were really upset. And so if we could keep that perspective, just so that the pitchforks and the torches don't just come out again,
Yes.
because it looked to me like that was the upset, that they were changing kind of the land use density in those areas.
Yep. Yes, and we'll, 100%, we'll get to that. How many, bear with me 1 minute, let me throw out one. How many of you in here know how to eat an elephant? Anybody?
One fork.
We have 2 people that know how to eat an elephant. One bite at a time, right? And we've got a very big elephant to eat in 5 or 6 or 7 weeks, hopefully less. This is gonna be about taking bites. The first bite is what properties are we talking about? The second are what changes were made to the definitions of those properties? And do we feel like those were given appropriate consideration or not? And if not, what are some of the reasons? We may say in the Lions Thrive plan and in the old IGA, it talks a lot about maintaining the style and the feel of Lions and the feel of neighborhoods and protecting current citizens and protecting wildlife. If we feel like those things weren't considered, then that becomes our recommendation. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you.
Okay.
Well, and to Wendy's point too, the fatal flaw analysis, that's what we
Yes.
got.
Yeah, that's a simple.
Who builds the road through 20 other properties that
Right.
aren't in the plan, and who maintains the road?
Exactly.
Yes.
We have,
So that's what we'll get to. That's where we need to get to. Not solving that problem. Not saying who's gonna build it, but does it make sense? Has it been looked at? Do we feel like it needs to be studied? That's our test. Right? Does that feel comfortable to everybody? Anything else on this?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, you may.
Or just to help me understand the task force's perspective? The relevance of the old IGA. I mean, I guess how I've been thinking of that is that was a picture painted 20 years ago. And there are some things that, maybe haven't changed, like the town's concerns about steep slopes, et cetera. I guess, Andrew, maybe you can jump in here. Because what I'm going to say is, I don't know that we referenced the old IGA significantly in thinking about the next 10 years. Like, it wasn't a big aside from like the general map, it wasn't a big consideration for us. So just to put that out there for the task force, I don't know that we were trying to recreate that IGA.
Correct. And I understand your comment that it was sort of developed as a blank slate. I understand that completely. But as we review it, it is relevant in my mind, and the task force can either back my thoughts on this or not, but it is relevant in my mind so we understand what's changed, because it also impacts back to the comprehensive plan. There was a lot of input over a long period of time on the big bucket issues that the community seemed to be concerned about. And when you look at those documents, the changes that were made from the old plan to the new plan, it seemed to be quite different than a lot of things that the community seemed to be talking about in the comprehensive plan. And so the reason, Hannah, that I feel like we need to look at the old one is so we understand what's changed. And we go, well, why did that change? From a document that was agreed in 2012 to 2024, I understand there's going to be changes. I think Julie made that point very eloquently at the last meeting. But we have to have a baseline to understand what is it we're looking at. I get that we're looking at the 2024 plan, but to me, we have to understand history as well if we're going to understand the future.
And I think understanding the history of the 2012 IGA was just before the flood, where the town lost a lot of its homes. So, and we've had a comprehensive plan update. So again, to look at that as a document, it's important historically, but also a lot of the community has changed since that original document.
And that's what we'll look at. That's why we're going to go learn the properties. That's why we're going to look at the 2024 document and see where we think there's recommendations for the Board of Trustees to address.
Yeah.
Julie.
So I just want to comment on one part of your mission here, which I think is overall really good, but I think when we look at number 3 and we look at determine if we agree or disagree with the changes, I would challenge that binary. And I think the second part of that goal is much more important, which is, do we think changes were made with adequate consideration of different areas? And if not, what do we want to make sure they considered? I think if we get into this kind of binary of, I agree with that change, I disagree with that one, we're not gonna get anywhere. So let's eliminate that binary and let's say, do we believe these changes were made with consideration of all of the important elements? And if not, or if so, or what do we think should have been considered? And then maybe the town can come back and say, oh, as a matter of fact, we did a study of this, this, and this, and here's that data, so that they can, because I don't think we know everything that went into this. And I really want to try as much possible to avoid
the binary,
because that's going to get us nowhere. So let's not agree or disagree. Let's identify the factors that we hope were considered in the inclusion of these properties. And then the town can tell us if they were considered or.
Yeah, and we'll ask those questions. And if they were, and we feel like it was adequate consideration, we'll note that. And if we feel like they weren't adequately considered, then that will become our recommendation.
They get
to
to justify,
consider.
and the recommendation can be justify your decision to do this based on these. I mean, we're not gonna have a lot of time for back and forth. We're not gonna be like, here's our recommendations, and then they come back and we go back. It's
Right.
one time. So
Yeah.
do we want them to, can they justify those decisions?
Yeah,
I
great
think that's
edit.
better than.
I like that. David?
Just one clarification point to your, when you say town, I want to clarify, it's really the Board of Trustees that are making these
That's what I meant,
decisions.
yes.
Okay, and I just want to make sure for everybody's edification.
When I say town, I
because
mean Board of Trustees.
The Board of the staff works on behalf of the Board of Trustees, so the town's not making unilateral decisions on any of this. So.
Yeah, excellent. Everybody feeling like we're on the same page from a task force standpoint?
I just have one administrative question or timing question. When was the IGA, the 2024 IGA drafted relative to when like the Thrive plan was developed? Did that happen at the same time?
The Thrive plan was published in January 2023, I think.
It was adopted in January
Adopted,
2023, so it was published for months before that, but
For the IGA draft, yeah.
but we actually made an extension to our IGA
Mhm.
to be able to finish Thrive, so that we had that to use as.
Great, okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was due to expire on 2020, in November 2022.
Ah, okay, got
So
it,
we're 2 years beyond,
got it.
the original expiration. Good. Okay, second topic then, and again, this is one that I really don't want us to get into like wordsmithing. And it's probably even a topic maybe more suited to follow up next time, but this is the attempt from last meeting to summarize in 1 page or less what the IGA is and what the task force is and what it is not. Because I think there's a lot of citizens and maybe even some in this room that feel like we're tasked with solving bigger things than we're tasked to solve. And so this will go into the minutes. It's a simplified definition of the IGA and roles the IGA should play. There is a copy on the podium for the audience, if anybody
Is that
wants
the
it.
one you sent?
Yes.
Okay. Just to start off, PPA is a different thing than PAA. You were saying proposed annex
Oh,
area.
it's a
Because
typo.
there is a PPA and that's a planning thing.
Yeah.
Does
So
anybody need a copy to?
that should be.
Yeah, I know some of it. I'll just pass those. And we pass them, Victoria. Oh, she does.
If there's extras.
Okay.
I have that.
That's- So maybe the recommendation on this, again, this was really intended to be the tool so that when we collectively, as the task force, are talking to our neighbors, talking to other people around town, that we're all explaining things in generally the same way. And that when people come and say, well, what are you gonna do about the hole in the ground in Main Street? You go, I don't know. Not in our scope.
Don't ask
Yeah,
people.
exactly.
Pools.
It's the new pool,
It's
yeah.
a new tool, yeah.
North Carolina swimming hole, leave it alone.
So,
It's a type of PAA, not PPA.
I would like to maybe say, we take this and then circle back around at the next meeting, if you guys feel like that's appropriate. Do we need like some sort of movement on that or motion?
Or just
So good.
or just a dance party on it.
Dance party?
I mean, I think that's just an action item
Yeah.
for each
An
of us
action
to take a look and provide whatever feedback we have, including typos.
Including
It's
typo.
just that
It's
planning
a
area is
different
what we
thing.
keep getting
Yeah, I
into,
just-
the muck of that thing.
I didn't want us to lose another week, so
Okay.
I felt like we needed to have something, again, nothing is sacred. If it doesn't sound right, if it doesn't flow right, let's fix it. It's really a tool for us, the task force, in our communication efforts.
And Doug, can I jump in there?
Yes, please.
So I know that there was a concern that this might be breaking the open meetings. And so I did suggest to Doug that this document get posted with the agenda moving forward so the public sees it at the same time.
Yeah.
And has an
Oh,
opportunity,
okay, at the posting of the agenda, not
Yeah.
just the posting of the minutes.
Yeah.
not to just you guys.
Okay.
It needs to be posted to the public as well.
Got it.
And I did say this is probably about kind of borderline of how much detail, but he didn't ask for any feedback from it. So I'm okay with that, but in the future, because I know you are so time limited, we just need to post those on the agenda as well, so the public can read it and also respond to it.
Did you get a copy, Sunny?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So that brings us down to our next topic, which is a discussion of maps. And so maybe this is where I'm able to share my screen. And I'm gonna pass, so what I've done is, this is all public stuff. So there's a copy of the 2024 IGA map. There's the 2012 IGA map. There's the Lions Thrive map. Definitions of density from the IGA. And I'll warn you that the handouts I tried to create of these maps, some of them are really clear and some not so much, as my ink was running out. But what I tried to do, once those make it around, how do I share my screen? You did?
Yep, that's it.
Bear with me just one moment, please.
I don't know who else would have
Zoom.
Yeah, let's see, yes, yeah, there you go. Perfect. We might zoom in a bit.
I will.
I like to get back to
Help us. I'm all about taking all the support I can get. Okay, do you guys all have a copy? So you'll have a digital copy as well. We'll add to this as we get more data. But what I tried to do was take everything I could find so that you at least had a starting point and could see things a little more clearly. So just to walk you through it, the first page is the table of content. So we can all stay on it. The page numbers are marked. So as we're talking about it, if you refer to a map, call out the page number. The first map on page 2 is the current draft IGA map. Page 3 is the 2012 IGA map, just for reference. Page 4, and you can see on the screen versus the printouts, it's really crystal clear. So you might want to look at this on your computer, and we'll include this with the minutes as well. But the 2023 Thrive Comprehensive Plan map, again, only for reference. We're not trying to relitigate any of these things. Page 5, a density definition, and these are just excerpts from the draft IGA. And the reason why we thought this was important is because if we do get into the specificity of particular parcels, I think it's important for us to sort of visually know what is the density, when we look at a neighborhood or a part of town, what is the density we're talking about? Andrew's done a great job. You saw my request to him about trying to help us understand density, and he was able to pick some different, or Cassidy did. Congratulations, thanks, Cassidy. They were able to take some different blocks around town and help us calculate the density, at least as a point of reference, and we'll use that probably during our tour tonight, so we can physically look at some areas of town and go, this is what this density looks like.
And if I may, just because this was a conversation with the county, when you see units, that doesn't necessarily mean a standalone home. That is just a unit. So this could be, it could be a duplex, or it could be, a large home that has, 3 different units within it, triplex.
Yeah,
Just
Andrew,
don't-
actually, this is a good part to jump in. I don't know what blocks around town you looked at, but I think if you have a kind of consistent development pattern downtown, and it maybe isn't a good comparison from a potential design outcome in these new areas. Like my neighborhood, is pretty much all single family homes. So that kind of density is going to look, so let's just say that's 6 units per acre. That's going to look really different than maybe you have 3 homes and each one has an accessory dwelling unit. That's still 6 units per acre. And the character is still pretty, heavily single family detached. So I think when we think about density, we have to remember that can, like Andrew said, look a lot of different things.
David, did you have an add-on to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that these aren't the only 3 options. Sure.
Right.
I-
This is just
Maybe
what's,
saying the
this is what's in the IGA
Agreed.
today.
Agreed.
So,
But this task force may choose to say a state zoning, which is 1 per acre, or ag 1, which is 1 per 5 acres, so.
right. And I think Barney mentioned that as well last week, that, there could be things in between these, and that might be part of our recommendation as we look at this. Okay, the next page, this is a high-level overview. The red line on this page is the current town boundaries. The black lines, which kind of intersect with the red lines, are the areas called out on the IGA mostly, I believe. In the shaded areas and different things. Arguably, for anybody listening online, especially the folks on Apple Valley Road, the next page covers Apple Valley Road. I couldn't fit it all on one map, so that's why it's not on here. I wasn't trying to exclude Apple Valley from my thinking, but that's what that map is. Everything else after this are zoom, we zoom in on this, but I wanted everybody to have a perspective of where these different parcels and properties were. Here's the Apple Valley Road area. I wasn't able to figure out how to get anything from the IGA to overlay on this one. Nothing changed in this from the past. There were no changes in definitions or boundaries. The only thing I wanted to call out, because some people may or may not know it's there, and my arrows may not be exactly right, but there's one parcel at the top end of Apple Valley Road that is owned by the town, correct? And that's the old water, is it a treatment plant? And so I just wanted to flag that. I think that's kind of the only thing that might come up as a question. I could be wrong. Anything else?
Right across the road is also,
Yeah, it's the
inn.
the inn.
Oh, the-
Oh, yeah, the water tank's on the other side, yeah.
And
Stone Mountain Lodge.
was that Stone Mountain Lodge though, was that in addition to the 2024 over the 20?
No, that
No,
was,
it's
that
the same. So it's, if you look at this on the screen is the 2012, and it's that upper,
Yeah,
I don't know if I can get my mouse.
with
up
the
there.
road patching.
this one.
Right there. Whoops.
Sorry.
Yeah, my mouse is really weird. So it's that, and it's the exact same on the 2012. Okay, so that's why I didn't focus too much on that. Again, anybody from Apple Valley listening, no disrespect intended there. This is the north side Steamboat area. I tried to do call outs so you can see Fifth Avenue just to orient yourself. So this is downtown. This is Fifth Avenue going up. This is Steamboat Valley. So you have the three parcels, this big one all that goes all the way up on the left side with the red, and then this little unread area. That's the Boone property. As you come up Steamboat and then up Vasquez, that's this street, this block in the middle is the Carpenter property. This property next to it really has nothing to do with the Carpenter property. It just happens to be the same size. It was called out in the IGA as non-development. That's a topic for that property owner in the town because there's some concerns he has about his. Just over here to the right-hand side is the Connor property, and it's this entire black box. Okay, the Connor property. And the development area is the unread shaded area. And we'll see that this evening. Just as note, this large parcel just above the Connor property that goes actually up and off the map. That's the Russell property, Cat and Ed Russell. Their home is in this lower section here. The rest of this 38-ish acres, I can't remember, is a conservation easement, which I thought was relevant as we get into that. This was my attempt because the Boone property, I didn't think we were going to be able to get onto it. It's great that we are, is tough to see from almost any angle we're going to be at, but it's this very lower corner of it. And that was my attempt to try to get it, but my printer wasn't very happy with that. So you kind of know it's just under 5 acres, I believe. This is interesting. I put this one on there only to show you what we're able to do. So with this map, we can overlay anything over these maps. This, for example, is the north side of town. So the same map as that with the blue line overlaid on it. And the blue being within the blue line, the green, which was supposed to be yellow, is 50 feet above the blue line, As it gets more red or orange, it's moves to the 50 to 100 feet, and then anything that's red, which is pretty much all of this up in here, is 100 feet or more above the blue line.
That is.
Are you guys familiar? So,
It's like, what's water service?
That's how far
essentially?
we can provide water. Anything above the blue line, your water pressure will drop.
Question though, if infrastructure gets, modified or upgraded, can that change?
That's correct.
Because you guys were talking about a water tower earlier to amend, okay.
But who pays for that?
well,
The town's kind of broke.
and this gets us into the weeds, but to try to answer the short question, it can, but we have, in the town statutes, we have, what's the word I'm looking for? Not regulations,
Restrictions
restrictions.
that
Up.
nobody up there has filed currently.
Well, they still exist on the books on where we can and can't develop. So we have, and that's into the weeds, but it's data we can certainly pull out about where the town has said they want to develop or not develop. Right now, it says we will not do any more development above the blue line. So it is what it is.
So those properties that are in the yellow, are those all?
They're all above the
wells?
blue line.
So none of them have water.
They do
They
have,
do.
they do have
Yeah.
water.
So we have granted lots and lots of variances of this blue
They
line.
have, that's what I said.
Okay, so they. Wells? Are they on wells or are they on city?
They're
Around
city.
city water.
Okay, so,
If
okay,
they're
so it's
within
not an
boundaries.
all right, so it's I got it. I just want to make sure it's clear that it's not an
Yeah,
absolute,
and
it's
this is-
clearly lots and lots of water above the blue line.
But when we talk about bringing in other people, so when we get into, again, we're gonna identify where the properties are, but I wanted you to see that there are other tools we can overlay this. We can overlay floodplains over any of this. We can overlay fire risk assessments using federal data and state data over this. We can do migration paths, although everything is a migration path. I tried that last night.
That's an easy overlay.
That's an
then.
easy overlay. There's things that I didn't even know that we're looking at, which I don't think affect anything. There's ridge line risk areas, so
Okay.
the protecting the view lines or the ridge lines, the higher you get, the more red it gets, so we can see that as it relates to any properties. So there's a lot of data and there's a lot of experts that we can tap into, both in this room and at our disposal. So when we get into assessment or asking questions like, what does the blue line really mean? Why would we or would we not do it? That would be the time to do that.
Two clarifications. A migration path was animals
Yes.
and,
Yes.
just
Sorry.
wanna make sure.
Yes.
I was like,
Vagrant
Christ, I
evacuation.
know what's going on.
Oh, you're gonna have a cloud of Venezuelans coming through.
Can you go back to the one you were at the blue line? All those houses in green,
And help me, Victoria, if I misanswered. No, and I don't know when the ordinances were put into place in terms of restricting development above the blue line. These are all on city water.
okay.
These houses that come up this hill, this is Vasquez, if you can see my mouse up there, kind of in the center. This is Vasquez Court. They have water pressure issues.
Oh, so they are on city, but they don't, so
They
they're
have
not
real
on
water
wells.
pressure.
It's not, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And in full disclosure, and I was gonna point this out tonight, right where my mouse is, right there, and for anybody watching, that's the top of Horizon Drive, 1020 Horizon Drive, that's my house. right there. Just so you
Do you have a
guys,
water pressure problem?
we don't have, not generally, we don't, sometimes we do, but when people
Is there-
run into
is that a
fire
water tower
hydrants.
up there?
Yeah.
What'd you say, Sonny?
Is that a water tower up there near
No.
that black square?
No. No. Oh, you mean right there?
Yeah, right there.
No, that's I don't know what that is, a house or something.
Okay. So, but there's a water tower up the top of the hill near the cemetery and someone said that's not being
I don't
used.
think that's been used for.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's,
been removed from the system.
The
So
water
that's-
tower,
that's gonna be removed.
Our water tank is up in Apple Valley.
right, I think
Okay.
that's it right there, and if you go back to page 7. Is that correct? I think,
Yeah,
I'm pretty
no,
sure.
go over, oh, you can't go to the right even more. There's two tanks up there. That's not,
Whoops.
Yeah, that one.
that's
So-
not ours. That's,
Oh, that's not ours?
well, it's ours, but it's not used.
Oh,
So the one tank's gonna be taken down.
No, it
No.
just isn't used. It's still,
Yeah.
it's
It's
been
just
there, but it
this-
hasn't had
but
water in
it's
there
somewhere in
for a
that
long.
vicinity.
It's up
You
above
turn it
that.
into big.
Oh, it is, oh, more often.
That's
And
what they
over
should
to
do.
the side.
Yes.
Oh, it is, okay.
It's a
Yeah,
million.
so
I want it to be a
someone
climate
asked me about that, and I thought they were,
That.
I thought they were gonna take it down. Is there a reason why?
Well,
Why is the Apple Valley one so like that?
We
Yeah,
also
it's a
have
big
some
Started-
canyon.
That's the one
Start at B0A and just go around. man.
But yet, we're not in the city.
Okay, let's bring it back here, so.
This is
Okay,
probably
let's
too
bring it back, Cindy.
complicated, but with the new laws that were just signed in, where many people can live in a house and anyone can build an ADU, wouldn't it be reasonable to assume there's gonna be a lot more pressure on our water and our sewer system, even if we didn't build anything?
I mean, I don't think we can predict the future, but I will say that is a consideration, and we already had this discussion about, this shouldn't just be about housing, but what properties could we possibly place, extend a water line so we can provide more adequate water to areas that are already above the blue line and improve fire suppression services.
And I'd recommend that we take as an action item to include in our review, after we identify where all the properties are, a discussion with somebody.
We have a sewer and water master plan that we have enough capacity to serve our entire IGA parcel. That's already
And
been.
even with the changes that the governor has made, so that there's no limit on how many people are in a house, and
No,
no limit
because
on ADUs.
No way to know what that looks
What
like.
that
yet.
But it's gonna look like more people,
We don't know that.
well,
There are still limits, right? There are still.
Fire
Fire
limits,
limits,
building code.
Yeah.
the fire code.
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, that could potentially, certainly ADUs is gonna add.
But let's take that as a data, an area of data that we need to understand how that's being considered related to this.
I think, I saw Hannah's hand up earlier.
Oh,
I
I'm
think
sorry,
what she was
Hannah.
probably
Yeah, I can't
gonna
see the
say
screen.
is, the county can provide tons of overlay maps.
Yeah.
Whatever you want. They have it in their GIS system. So,
Which is
Hannah,
also available online through ArcMap.
Great.
But yeah, thanks,
That's where something-
Victoria. But yeah, you had showed the blue line on that slide. That was when I had raised my hand, because what I sort of was hearing from the task force before is this idea of developing like a set of parameters that you like will make your recommendation based on. So one so far that I've heard is like alignment with the comp plan. And it sounds like you're starting to explore some of those other areas that you want to maybe have inform your conversation and your recommendation. So the blue line for you, what I did want to make sure that you were aware, because you weren't involved in these conversations, but when those maps were drawn, one thing that was really concerning for both of us, I think, were steep slopes and geologic hazards in all of these areas. We have mapping of geologic hazards, and I recall the Lions Thrive plan talks about keeping development sort of off of steep slopes and preserving kind of your geologic visual character as well, sort of. So some of that went into the thought processes of drawing those lines. I think particularly on Boone and Connor, I think they generally, those lines end up following sort of contours. So just some background there, but yes, if there are lots and lots of maps.
Yeah. Continuing on, just again to orient everybody, and this will be helpful when we do our drive around tonight. This is the eastern half-ish of the town. I tried to flag the properties the best I could. And there were a few things that I couldn't jive on the comp plan or on the IGA, so we'll drill into those, and I think Andrew's gonna be able to help us drill into some of that as well, but at least you can physically begin to understand where those properties are. And then on this map, I drilled in, that's the Lucanen parcels.
And we are gonna be able to go up there.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic, that's great. Those are hard to see, and so that I've seen parts of them, but I've never been up into the bottom part.
Yeah, I am asking him if a car can get up there and turn around, or if it needs to be a truck. So we definitely can at least go into the front, but he said he will meet us at the gate.
Oh, awesome. Awesome, very good news. Thank you, Victoria.
To see the court, so people understand what B is.
I'm trying to remember, I don't think we drove up there last time.
Well, maybe not. And it's owned by Cemex. That is not owned by Lucanen. Parcel B is not Lucanen. That's
really?
owned by Cemex, so we won't be able to go onto it, but we can, look from
It's,
the
I
border.
thought it was referenced on the IGA is looking at B.
Cemex quarries it.
Yeah, they have the list on it.
So that's, again, when we look at the document, if it's calling out one thing and it's actually something else, then that's gonna be a recommendation to fix the documents. This, I took those straight off the IGA. Definition. I tried to add definitions where I could. I tried to add, if I saw that anything had changed, I tried to flag it just for a point of reference. And then there's the best I could do to get the whole far east corridor mapped out, so you can at least visualize where things are. I know last week we talked about the Sunnyvale.
Shady Lane.
Shady Lane.
Kind of the
I knew.
opposite. Shady Lane is under Sunnyvale.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think this far right side is that area, and I wasn't 100% clear what was or was not in the IGA map on that, but we'll clear, but at least you can physically see where things are. And if it's not in, we may say it should be. Maybe that's a recommendation.
Where's the one that they're considering annexing right now?
It's, correct me if I mispointed. You see my mouse there in the middle?
Uh-huh.
It's this basically kind of
Okay.
C
Is that
shape.
that Tebow property?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's-
Tebow just bought.
It stops like here, I think. This is a big ridge line coming down and I think of water or something.
Victoria, does Gwen still own that property back there?
No,
No,
Six
Tebow
inches.
owns it.
What do they
Tebow-
want
the
to
Tebow owned
do with
part of
that's
it.
why it looks like crap.
Sorry?
What does Tebow want to do with it?
Mixed use development.
He wants to do commercial in the front half and housing in the back.
Is that helpful? Does that begin to kind of frame or give you at least something to visualize?
Yeah,
Something in
yeah,
particular?
yeah. I mean, if you saw the front part of the property, it obviously needs to be redeveloped. But if you saw Gwen's property in the backside of that barn, she renovated that barn and it's gorgeous. And that home is beautiful back there. And I drove back there a couple of days ago in the back and it's so gorgeous. I know it's a one-lane drive back there and you got the bridges. And I don't know who owns all that way back there, but it is, it's really nice back there. I guess we'll drive back there again tonight. Wendy, you said you can't go?
Yeah, I will be maybe for the first hour, but I won't be able to stay.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
as we go forward, if you have any overlays, I think to Hannah's point, I know between Hannah and Andrew and the access that I've been able to get,
Right,
we'll get any map anybody wants.
okay.
I have this in a PDF, I have it in a PowerPoint so far, and we can keep adding to it. So we have a deck or a book as anybody wants. So just keep that in mind. This is a living, working tool, and it was strictly for our use.
Okay, yeah, I'm not gonna serve my mama.
Just a clarification, we are not at all, like the site-specific CMAX IGA is unrelated to any of this. That's its own
Unrelated,
thing.
yeah. And there are maps of that. I just didn't put them in here because
Yes, sir.
kind of out of scope. Yeah.
We have enough.
And we haven't, right. All right, everybody good? Remember, there's a restroom if anybody needs it. So let's move on. Victoria, no, we didn't have this on, but do you want to say anything about tonight's schedule or how you
Well,
want that to
I'd
play
like
out?
to try to coordinate vehicles if we can to be as few as possible. And I don't know what else you have to cover today, but it is kind of sometimes hard to talk, outside with a large group. So I didn't know if you wanted me to jump in now, so I didn't. But if we had a little time, we could point out a few things.
Before we go,
each
maybe?
parcel. But let's see who's going tonight, first of all. How many do we have?
I'm not gonna go for the whole time, but okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, when you're gonna,
Well, I can go for till like 7 o'clock. Really
Is that
only wanna
I-
see
I
the
would
team.
start-
Maybe you two go, maybe you two can be in.
Yeah.
Maybe you two go
And I can,
together and leave at 7 or
so,
something? But how many vehicles do we need? David, you said you had one you could drive, a bigger one?
Yeah, I can see five,
You can seat 5?
including yourself?
well, five total.
Yeah.
If people want to ride in the back of the truck, we can go.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So you can do 5.
I
The
can
town-
do 4 or
The town
5.
car has 4. We could take a town car, so that's not putting any of you at personal liability.
We're not getting out, right?
But
Yeah.
some
We may.
places you might,
Get out one.
you may not want to if you don't want to.
Well, I
Can't.
mean, because, I could drive myself and just sit in the car.
I know, but
mean,
then you won't be able to hear like what we're saying about the parcel and pointing out.
And I
Or
think,
the
what-
other thing is I could maybe take the 3 of you at another time if you want to do
Uh,
that.
yeah, I really only wanna see Boone and Connor.
Oh, then we'd have to schedule a family food.
although if it
But
was
I
just
could
the
just
2 of
drive
us.
there,
Well,
whatever.
they live there. I mean, you gotta get permission.
No, I know, I'm just saying, when you guys go to Boone tonight.
Oh,
I
we're
could-
gonna start there. So,
Okay.
right, I told her it'd
Yeah.
be 6:05 or 6:10.
Okay, well then,
That's perfect.
And then when we, we'll
Just
be able to
leave
see
it
the
there.
Boone property from the ground.
I've seen the
And then
rest.
when we go up towards the Connor property, we can actually go on Russell's property. And from there, you can see the Connor property, the Carpenter property, and the Boone property from almost an aerial view.
And you know where that's at? I don't,
It's right.
do you have permission for the
Yeah,
rest?
yeah.
Okay, 'cause I
And
don't-
he may follow along. He's probably watching the video right now. I don't know.
So that's what I was gonna ask, is how much access are we gonna have, or?
Well, I told them we were going to be in as few as vehicles as possible. And that, the Boone property, they said we can drive all the way up to the lake if we want, but I don't even want to show it to you because you're all gonna want to jump in. there.
This is a little
They own a
cooler today.
beautiful turquoise gravel mine up there. That if that property, if the 45 acres would go to the county or become open space, yeah, it's a sweet little spot.
All right, and again, the goal of it is
Fire
to
truck.
orient everybody to what it is, right? We don't have to have deep discussions on it.
No, it's just. to
I'd
get you
rather
guys on.
everybody to bring their maps, take notes, and then when we come back, our first topic, next time we meet, which is gonna be the segue, is to review any questions, thoughts, what other information, whatever.
So the plan is, if we could, I'd like to meet here. David, if you don't mind driving.
Sure.
And I'll drive, and then I guess Wendy and Charlie, if you guys want to, or go for a part of it, you certainly can, if you want to take a separate vehicle, but I think we should keep it kind of
Try to
down.
keep
Both
it
of
to
those
2,
are very dusty.
Yeah.
You know, they're rough roads. I don't want anyone, compromising their vehicle. But if we could just get by with the 2 main vehicles, then you have the ability to talk too, which is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 6 o'clock right outside on
Yep.
on the picnic bench or
Yeah,
whatever.
just meet out here.
Perfect.
And then we're gonna start on the north side.
Okay.
And then on Lucanen, I told him it would be, I said probably no later than 7. And then finish up on the eastern corridor.
Perfect. And then if anybody has questions on Apple Valley, they can drive up there
Yeah,
and
Apple
see
Valley,
everything on
since it
their own.
wasn't changing at all.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too. Okay, last couple of items, that takes it through our kind of map workshop prep for tonight. Overlay discussion, we covered that. Can we have a quick summary of
So far, I
actions?
only have 2. One being for everyone to review the 1-pager and provide feedback either to you alone or to bring it on to the next meeting. Do you have a preference? Would you rather? Okay.
Doesn't matter.
That way it's not a meeting. And then the second thing was just to identify any additional maps or overlays that we might want for the future. That's all I have for action.
And-
I missed any.
A follow-up from last week, does anybody have any other specific topics that we need to find a local expert on, whether it's utilities or anything else? At this stage, we can always throw that in later. Okay, agenda for the next meeting. My feeling is, again, let's take this in bites. The first agenda item is a follow-up on what we learned from the tours today. And then we can either dive into the actual document itself and see if there's discussion topics and issues that we want to address with that. Might be the next logical piece of the puzzle to put together. That sound okay to everybody?
Yeah.
And I think those two things will occupy our hour and a half. If I recall right, it's the 26th, next Wednesday, whatever next Wednesday is. 12 o'clock here, 12 to 1:30 again. And David,
I was gonna say, I had invited the mayor on the request.
okay,
To kind of talk about what went into the draft IGA. But just, a lot of it was done in executive session by the prior board, so she's not free to discuss that, but I think generally she can share with what some of the intent was.
And then I would say finalizing the one pager, because the.
and finalize the intake, okay? Yes, sir.
And just for you all, and this was Hannah's idea, and I think it's a great one. If there's some way that when you're at those properties tonight, to try to rate to really have something that leadership can grasp, that would be great for an action item for next week, is to come with some sort of, and if we need to provide some sort of rating sheet, I don't know, but to try to figure out, the developability of those parcels. I think that would be really helpful.
Rating like 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, just so I get an idea.
Yeah,
Or type of setting, potential uses.
Or criteria, we could discuss that. Maybe we take that on instead of getting into the legal document itself.
That
another
was
week.
my recommendation or ask, really, because I can't go on the site visits with you today, but I was like, it would really be really helpful if the task force could give their impressions of the properties from their visits, just what you thought about them, I guess, what you thought might be important to consider for each of them. I mean, it would be helpful for me, like I said, because I can't hear the conversation tonight. I was like, well, it'll probably be helpful for the rest of members of the community as well, so.
Exactly. Excellent. So that's that. That'll be roughly the agenda for the next time. In terms of next meetings, again, we are scheduled on, what did I say, the
26th.
The 26th, yeah, Wednesday, 26th. We're also scheduled on the Monday, the 1st of July. You had a question about whether or not your availability, if we need to shift the time around on that Monday, do you know?
No, I think about that. So we're gonna meet again next week. What time?
Next week on Wednesday, the 26th at 12 o'clock,
Okay, fine,
right
no
here.
problem there.
And then
July 1st.
July
And
1st.
July 1st, the only shift on July 1st, if you guys will make a note of this, there's another meeting in here that runs till 12 o'clock. So we've been asked to push to 12:30 on that day. We
Okay.
go 12:30 to 2,
Okay.
if that works. Are we in a position to set any, I'm sorry, that was on the 1st, on Monday, the 1st. It'll be 12:30 to 2 instead of 12 to 1:30. Because there's some, I think you're in here doing something else. Can we try to pick the next couple of dates, or are you guys comfortable with that? Does Tuesday, the 9th work for people? And I think the topic, by the time we get there, will really be to drill into starting to review and gather specific data about what has and hasn't been looked at, or what we think should be looked at. If Tuesday, the 9th works.
Yes. And that'll be at noon.
I'm recommending, assuming that the room's available. 12 to 1:30 on Tuesday 9th. Any pros or cons, yays or
I
nays?
may or may not be here.
You may be traveling those couple of weeks, if I
Yeah.
remember right. Everybody else cool with that, as best you can tell? Okay. And then if we want to try something the week of the 15th of July, I'm going to be traveling that week, but I'm available by Zoom, so whatever. If nobody has a particular date, I would say let's do one more Tuesday, noon time meeting, or at least try to, Tuesday the 16th. 12 to 1:30. And then I feel like after that, the next meeting or two should be, maybe we plan in the evening, so if there are more people that want to ask us questions or understand things, it might be a little easier for the general public. Do we have any feelings on that one way or the other? Martin, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea. It's hard to think about how far along we'll be at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you want, we can hold on setting that, or we can pick the day and not set a time.
Yeah, let's do, because that's starting festival season.
Yeah, so me too. That's why I have it on.
Yeah.
Rocky
I mean,
Grass
I
is that
work
week.
it, so I'm gonna be working all
So
days.
maybe we tentatively plan something for Tuesday, the 23rd of July, but time TBD. And then the same thing for the following week, the week of the 29th. Maybe we target again Tuesday, the 30th, but set a time on that as we get closer, but at least we can be looking at that date. See what's available and see how that, I don't know how that jives with board meetings and other.
Nice to try to keep it consistent with Tuesday.
Okay, and we'll do time TBD. And then we'll figure out things beyond that. Hopefully by then, we're into crafting our recommendations, is my hope. And as we feel like we're getting closer, I'll coordinate with Victoria and Holly about trying to get us on the BOT agenda for presenting it, but I don't wanna.
Yeah.
I don't wanna jinx it and suggest we're gonna be ready by a time, but it would be great if it were somewhere around that first meeting of August, if their schedule allows. Questions, comments? Yes, ma'am.
I'll just add to, like, when we were talking about ratings and observations on the properties, the obvious things to consider are access and topography, steepness, rocks and things of that nature. Those are the two ones. But, I'm losing my train of thought. Oh, moving forward, just looking at the properties, once we set foot on them, is everybody pretty good with the property search tool that we went through with last week? Because that oblique imagery, you can just
Zoom all over.
So that's a good way to really review those things.
Or Google Earth.
Good.
Yeah.
Google Earth, you put the address. in,
Yeah,
so we get to
the
see.
oblique imagery on Boulder counties is almost better, because you can do 360 views, but it's very similar.
Yeah.
It is.
Super. Can you remind us of what that,
It's the bottom.
So anybody have any other things in our last 2 minutes?
I got it.
Wow, we're so
Holy
timely
cow.
today.
I'm gonna do the best I can to make it tonight, even if I have to drive my own car, and if I don't hear you guys, but I'll just pick up each spot, and try to catch up.
Yeah. And I have a couple of walkie-talkies if need be, I can bring in.
All right,
At least
we'll
communicate.
try to.
And we'll review
Oh, that's
afterwards.
a good idea.
All right.
Yeah.
We wear hats like.
Can we have some motion things to get out of
Motion
here?
to adjourn.
All of it's
Second.
Woo-hoo.
All in favor? Cool.
Look at that, 2 minutes ahead of schedule. Well done.
I don't have to run home.
This is gonna be like a well-oiled machine
So
here.
you're just going early,
Thank,
right?
thank you, Hannah,
I'm
for
gonna go for
your
the first hour.
participation. We appreciate you.
Sure. I think we're getting a ride with.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. No, David's gonna take
Oh, wow.
four, and I can take three.
Thank you.
I am